They laughed when the tired woman asked, "Can I play for food?" 2 minutes later, the whole ballroom forgot to breathe. Let me pull you inside a night that looked perfect on the outside and was rotten on the inside. A grand hall glowing with chandeliers, tuxedos, gowns, and a piano that shined like a black mirror. People were there to feel rich, not to feel human. Then a woman with messy gray hair and a coat full of patches stepped in from the cold and asked, "One small thing, let me play." What happened next is bigger than music. It's a reminder that talent doesn't retire just because life gets hard, and dignity doesn't vanish just because money does. This is the story of how a forgotten legend lit up a room that had no idea who she was. Stay with me, because the ending will give you chills and maybe fix a small part of how we all see each other. Her name was Lena Hart. Years ago, people lined up around theaters to hear her. Old posters still cling to practice rooms at small music schools. Lena Hart, a night of fire and moonlight. She wasn't famous in the gossip pages. She was famous in the places that matter to music, in record shops where owners argue about phrasing, in late-night student dorms where young pianists try to copy the way she bends time inside a bar of Chopin. Then life happened. First, her mother got sick. The medical bills swallowed her savings. Then her manager ran her money through a friend's investment fund and it vanished. A winter apartment fire took the rest. Lena kept playing, but the stages got smaller, the audiences thinner, and the rent heavier. One day she missed a payment and the door lock changed. A week later, her piano was gone, sold by the landlord for a fraction of its worth. After that, music lived only in her hands and in her head. On the night of our story, Lena saw light spilling from a tall building and heard a piano through the door. Hunger does strange math. A roll and a hot drink felt like a dream. She walked in quietly, trying not to bother anyone. But you can't hide a coat like hers among satin and silk. Heads turned, eyebrows climbed. A few people smiled in that polite, hard way that means, "Please leave." Lena kept her voice soft. "If I play, could I have something to eat?" The pianist at the grand, young, beautiful, and clearly enjoying the attention, laughed first. Not an evil laugh, more the kind that says, "I've had a good night and I don't want it ruined." The crowd followed. Someone muttered, "This isn't a subway." Another whispered, "She'll scratch the keys." But Lena didn't flinch. She looked at the piano like a person looks at a friend they haven't seen in years. The hostess, sensing a chance to amuse her guests, waved a hand. "Let her try," she said. "1 minute." Lena nodded and stepped toward the bench. The problem wasn't hunger. Hunger is simple. You fix it with bread. The problem was the way the room saw her. In less than a heartbeat, the people there had decided her value. Old, coat, no money, no place at our table. We all do this, by the way. Our brains love shortcuts. Snap judgments feel safe and fast. But they're often wrong, and they shrink our world. Here, the challenge was razor. Clear. Could Lena change the room before the room pushed her back into the cold? She had a minute. That was the deal. The hostess didn't say it, but everyone heard it. If the playing was bad, she'd be escorted out. The young pianist sat to the side with a glass of champagne, wearing the kind of smile that means this will be funny. Lena placed her fingers above the keys and waited. Her hands shook a little, not from fear, but from the ache of sleeping outside and not eating enough. She took one small breath and chose a piece she hadn't played in public since the last good year of her life. Not a safe lullaby, not a showy run to prove speed. She chose something that tells the truth even when people don't want to hear it. The first notes were so soft some people leaned in without knowing they did it. A few guests still smirked, but the smirks didn't last. Lena's left hand built a river under the melody, steady and low. The right hand wrote light across the surface. You could hear time slow down, then stretch, then snap right back into place like a rubber band. It wasn't just accurate, it was alive. What made it different wasn't just skill. Plenty of pianists can play fast. Lena played with weight, the kind that comes from carrying loss without letting it crush you. She pressed into the keys like she was rooting for something to grow out of the wood. Each note had a start, a heart, and a goodbye. It felt like a conversation with someone you love and thought you lost. A few things started to happen around the room. People put down their glasses without looking at the table. A waiter near the door stopped mid-step and forgot to move. The young pianist's confident smile faded into a stare. The hostess, who expected a cute joke, felt her neck prickle. Lena kept going. She braided 2 themes, then slipped into a run so clean the air seemed to sparkle. When she reached the top, she didn't crash down like a fireworks show. She melted it into a whisper and let silence do half the work. Then she built again, bigger, wilder, yet always controlled. The room started to sway, not physically, but inside. Here's a quick truth about music and the body. When sound hits you in a certain way, your heart tries to match the rhythm. Your breathing follows. That's why the right song can calm you, or lift you, or make you cry without warning. Lena knew this, not from reading a study, but from living at the piano for a lifetime. She timed the swell of her phrases to the room's breath like a surfer riding a long wave. She reached the middle section and let the melody break open. Memories flooded her. The smell of rosin from the orchestra pit the night she debuted. Her mother humming in the tiny kitchen of their first apartment. A college kid crying after a concert because the piece made him call his dad. All of it flowed through her hands. For a moment, Lena wasn't hungry. She wasn't homeless. She was a musician doing the work she was born to do. The guests began to change. A man who joked about her coat pulled at his own cuff and looked at the floor. An older woman squeezed her husband's hand and didn't let go. Someone near the back whispered, "Who is she?" Lena didn't hear them. She was speaking in the only language she trusted. The final section came like sunrise. She let the left hand throb with warmth, while the right hand traced a thin line of hope above it. And then, instead of blasting a loud final chord, she did something braver. She took it down to almost nothing. One note, then another, each placed with a care that said, "This matters. This matters. This matters." The last note hung in the air like a bird that hasn't decided where to land. Silence, real silence, the kind where nobody even dares to cough. Lena lifted her hands but kept her eyes on the keys. She didn't want to look up and see the old faces again, just in case the spell was only in her head. Then the room exploded. Applause like thunder. People stood so fast their chairs bumped the marble. The young pianist was the first to reach her, not with a fake smile this time, but with both hands shaking. "What's your name?" she asked, voice thin. "Lena," she said, almost whispering. "Lena Hart." A few guests gasped. Not everyone knew the name, but the ones who did felt the floor tilt. "You can't be," a man said, half to himself. "Lena Hart from the St. Ives recording." "The Nocturnes." Lena nodded once. The hostess set her hand over her mouth. The waiter by the door blinked hard. Phones came out, not to mock now, but to search. Old videos, dusty reviews, album covers with Lena's face when it was younger but still hers. The comments they found were not polite. They were glowing, fierce, the kind of praise critics reserve for people who change the instrument they touch. The young pianist asked if Lena would play again. Lena smiled the kind of smile you give a student who is eager and a little lost. "Another time," she said. "I asked only for food. The kitchen sent out everything hot and good. Soup, bread with butter that melted fast, tea with honey. Not a plate for show, but enough to last days if packed right. Someone offered a hotel room. Someone else offered a ride. A music teacher begged for a lesson and tried to pay in advance. Lena thanked them with simple words and took only what she needed. Pride is heavy, but there's a different kind of pride that refuses to take more than you can carry. Before Lena left, she turned to the crowd and said one last thing. "You were listening." That's all a player asks. Later, people told the story in different ways. Some said it was a miracle. Some said it was karma. Some said it was a lesson. The truth sits somewhere in the middle. A hungry woman walked into a room, asked for a chance, and reminded everyone what respect sounds like. Here's what the night leaves behind, and why it matters beyond one room and one piano. Greatness hides in plain clothes. We miss it when we build our idea of a person from a 2-second glance. Talent doesn't retire when money does. Art belongs to the body that carries it. You can sell a piano, but you cannot sell the hands. Listening is an act, not a habit. When you really listen, you drop your defenses. You make room for the other person to be more than your guess about them. Kindness opens doors that status keeps shut. The hostess thought she was offering a joke. She accidentally offered a stage. That tiny opening changed everything. We are all one event away from needing grace. Maybe not the same kind of loss Lena faced, but something that humbles us. When it comes, we will hope someone sees us as more than a headline. What happened to Lena afterward? The story doesn't end with a record deal and a press tour, because life isn't a movie you can tie with a bow. But some real things did happen. People who'd been in the room called friends at small venues. A church with a good instrument opened its sanctuary in the afternoon so Lena could practice. A local station ran a short segment, not to gawk, but to explain who she was and what music like hers can do to a city's soul. Most important, Lena slept inside that week and ate warm food. She also gave 2 short lessons to the young pianist who had laughed at her. The lessons weren't about finger work. The student already had speed. Lena talked about breath and weight and silence, the spaces around the notes that make the notes matter. She said, "Don't fight the piano, ask it. It will answer." The student cried and didn't feel embarrassed about it. If you're wondering how a person survives what Lena did, the answer is simple and hard at the same time. She kept something small and steady alive inside her. A pocket flame. Every time life tried to snuff it out, she cupped her hands around it and guarded it with everything she had. That's what you hear when you hear players like her. The sound of a flame that refused to die. People started to talk differently about the homeless on that street. Not everyone, not overnight, but enough that it mattered. A bakery near the hall put a small sign in the window. Hot tea for anyone who asks. Few regulars at the hall, people with money and pull, set up a quiet fund to keep instruments in the hands of kids who couldn't afford lessons. They didn't put their names on it. They just did it. Months later, a student at a community college wrote an essay about that night. He'd been washing dishes at the event and had watched everything from the side door. He wrote, "I thought music was for rich people who had time to sit still. But when she played, I felt like something in me got fixed." His teacher sent the essay to Lena with a note that read, "You did more than play." And Lena? She kept moving, like people who've had to move for a long time often do. But now when she moved, doors sometimes opened before she knocked. A used upright piano found a temporary home in a small shelter. She tuned it by ear until a tech came. She played in the afternoons. Nothing fancy. Some days 3 people listened. Some days none did. She played anyway. The staff said the room felt calmer on the days she played, that arguments softened faster, that the air itself seemed kinder. There was talk of a small recording, not to chase fame, but to hold the sound of her at this age, with this life behind her. A friend borrowed mics, and a church lent the hall. If you ever hear it, you'll notice something odd. The tiny rustle of coats in the pews, the soft creak of the bench, a faint city bus outside. They left those sounds in on purpose. They are part of the truth. The music doesn't need a castle to be real. Here's the final piece to carry with you. We live in a time where people measure each other by the loudest thing they can see. A price tag, a follower count, a front row seat. But the things that make a person worth your time are almost always quiet, patience, craft, mercy, the courage to try again after the world shrugs. That night, in a hall built to show off money, a woman with nothing reminded everyone what wealth really sounds like. So if someone asks you for a small chance, 2 minutes at a piano, a foot in a door, a listen before a label, give it. Worst case, you waste a minute. Best case, you meet a legend. Hit play on the next story on your screen. You'll feel it in your chest.